Welcome to the all-new Marvel vs. DC comic show hosted by yours truly, Mike Spiderslayer. Guys, welcome back to Comic Book Corner 2.0. If you love daily comic book content and you like me helping you make decisions on what comic books to buy and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, why don't you go ahead and do so now. Yeah, guys, so this is kind of like a modified version of the series, which you would know is after the poll. And what I'm going to be doing is putting Marvel Comics against DC Comics here, and we're going to see which book gets the higher grade. Now, this week is almost like a sampler episode because it was a very small week for DC Comics. So I'm going to give you an insight of kind of what this series is. And if there's an uneven amount of comic books pitting against each other, there'll be a speed round at the end covering those comic books. So hopefully you guys like this little twist of the previous series that I had, and it'll be fun to see which comic book out of the big two, which company reigns supreme. So with that being said, let's get started with this very brief episode of Marvel vs. DC. Here we go, guys. These were the top two most pulled comic books of the week, and we're going to pit them against each other. We have Absolute Batman issue 4 going against The Amazing Spider-Man. This is issue 65. Now, Absolute Batman has been fire as of late. A lot of people are really enjoying it, where Amazing Spider-Man has really been in the shitter as of late. However, when it comes to the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, some would say this is a better story than what Zeb Wells was bringing to the table, and Joe Kelly will be taking over the series very shortly after this story. Now, let's check out the price for the comic books. In Absolute Batman, you get 28 pages for $5. The Amazing Spider-Man, you get 32 pages for $5. Not sure if that's like ads included in it or whatnot, or if it's actual story, right? When it comes to your creators in this one, we get Scott Snyder that does Absolute Batman, and we also get a different artist, just I think for this issue, which is Gabriel Hernandez Walta, which his artwork looks familiar, but I'm not sure where it's from. And then we have obviously Joe Kelly that's writing Absolute Spider-Man, and Safu that does the artwork here. So let's compare the artwork first when it comes to Absolute Batman, excuse me. That'd be cool, Absolute Spider-Man. The artwork is definitely much different. So if you're used to the original artist in the comic, you're gonna be like, it's kind of just like, it's almost jarring, right? I would say, like, you know, if this was the original issue of Absolute Batman, the original artist, maybe you'd be used to it. So I wouldn't say that it's not bad. It just looks real different, especially when like you see Absolute Batman in a comic book. It's just really off. It throws you off, okay? And then when it comes to The Amazing Spider-Man, well, you were obviously used to John Romita Jr.'s artwork all this time, and with the artwork in this comic, it actually looks pretty good. The colors are like bright and vibrant here, and it's nice. There's some good action sequences in this comic book. So yeah, I think that it was definitely a better issue art-wise, in my opinion, when it came to The Amazing Spider-Man. So now let's talk about the stories here when it comes to Absolute Batman and Spider-Man. So supposedly, when it comes to Absolute Batman, this is the origin story of Bruce Wayne and how he became the Batman that he is today, right? And I thought all his him going back to like bats and his interest in bats and knowing everything about bats just made him into that superhero that he is today. And I thought that was very interesting. It's a very heartwarmed, felt story. And what I liked is kind of like his thought process of what Batman was originally into the character that he was today. So excuse me. So very, very good story there. My only thing that took me out of it is I'm not a huge fan of when you do that inner dialogue, right, and you have it written in cursive. Just a personal preference of mine. You know, I just like regular print. That's just me, though, right? But nevertheless, it was good story with his dad. The origin story here. Now, when it came to The Amazing Spider-Man issue 65, here we have Spider-Man going against another scion of Sidekick, and they're fighting against each other, and the whole thing here is having Spider-Man deal with all the deaths or the weight of death on his shoulder or on his shoulders. So not only does he see people in his life die, but he sees everybody else die, and it gets to the point where it gets so heavy that he just gets to the point where he's like, well, I don't give a crap. Like, honestly, like, what's the point of living if you're just going to die? And what's the point of saving everybody if everyone is going to die? And you kind of feel sorry for Peter because that's not the character whatsoever, you know? But this scion of Sidekick or whatever just made him come to that realization. And now there's got to be somebody that gets him out of that funk, right? So I like this issue as well. I think maybe some people might not like this. Some people might think that it's out of character for Peter Parker, but I did like the issue, and I felt I did like how it did have some kind of emotion to the comic book. So when it comes to Absolute Batman and the Amazing Spider-Man, I'm going to give Absolute Batman a B+, and I'm going to give the Amazing Spider-Man a B. I thought Absolute Batman had a lot more heart, and I love seeing the origin story. It was a little bit slower. The artwork wasn't as strong. However, it was a good book, and it continues to be a good book. And the Amazing Spider-Man finally showed something that we haven't really seen in a while, and that is emotion and heart. Where the story goes from there, we shall see. Okay, so just like after the poll, when there's no other books to compete against each other, then we'll move on to that all-famous speed round. Now, I did have another DC and Marvel book potentially to go battle against each other, but I haven't read the series in a while, and I didn't think it would be fair to compete against another Marvel book, and that book was Batman and Robin. This is issue 17. It's hard for me to get back into this issue after I haven't read a couple of issues, so I did find myself a little bit lost of what was going on. The only thing I really understood and what I really enjoyed in here was that little girl that Damian was mean to in that original issue at that dinner party, and it looks like she is living. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the comic book here. So I'm going to continue to read it, and as I continue to read more, hopefully I'll get back into the story. The next book that is on our speed round this week is Venom. This is issue 2. I really wish this book had a book to go against to compare it to some other DC comics. But when it came to all new Venom, the real thing that I liked about this comic book is I love how Al Ewing is like hearing the fans and realizes how everybody hates Paul. And so what he does is he writes Dylan in this comic book, and he's just like, whatever you say, Paul. And he just disrespects Paul, hates Paul, and I think it is awesome, right? Best thing in here, we're finding Dylan is doing some investigation to find out who Venom is as well, as we still don't know. We have our suspects out there, but I think this is turning out to be a pretty decent book. Hopefully I just won't be disappointed when I find out who Venom is, but I still think it's Paul. So let me know in the comments below. All right, next book we're talking about is Wolverine. This is issue 5. I didn't feel like this story actually progressed all that much. We wound up seeing Wolverine being possessed by that yellow adamantium, or I would say that gold adamantium, right? And kind of like how we left off in this last issue is we leave off in this issue as well. Excuse me. So I don't know. I still think this is not the greatest series, but it's not the worst, and I do want to see the direction of where it goes and where this adamantiumite comes from. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. I would say continue to read it. And then we have the Uncanny X-Men. This is issue 8. Listen, take this series for what it is. I didn't think this was a great grand finale of this crossover. I am just not a huge fan of how much hatred like Rogue is showing towards Cyclops right now. I get there's a difference between the characters, point of view when it comes to saving Professor Xavier or leaving him behind, right? But God, there should not be that much hatred there. So I don't know. We'll see where Uncanny X-Men goes from here. And then we have the Sentinels. This is issue 4. So when it comes to the Sentinels, I thought this was a pretty solid issue, as we've gotten to see one of the Sentinel guys who is contracting this virus, or they all tend to die, and he's being remade into something new again. And we're trying to discover like how this program actually was created. And it goes back to the days of, I think, like Avengers Arena, where you had this kid that acquired the Sentinel code, and he like built a Sentinel on his own. And I remember Avengers Arena and like Avengers Academy way back when, and I was like, oh man, I remember when that stuff existed. So that's where this program kind of existed, and it came from Trask himself. So this was a pretty decent issue. It concludes in the next one, and I think it's good. I think it will be solid that, you know, we only have 5 issues as Sentinels. Now, the big thing is will this series, not this series, but will these characters continue to exist? I'm not sure, but I'm going to see it through and see what happens. So there you guys have it. There is the first, I would say, sampler episode of Marvel vs. DC Comic Show. Like I said, next week should be a better week, where we have more Marvel Comics versus DC Comics. Who will win? Who will lose? Well, you'll find out next week. Tell me your guys' thoughts on this idea for a series. And of course, if you did not check out Worthy Ones, which covers the new issue ones for the week, check that out. Check out the other brand new series called Indie Gems, where it focuses on independent comic books only. And of course, guys, if you love other content, there's always more content for you to check out. Support the local comic shops, keep collecting, but always remember, read your comics so we have great comic conversation. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you real soon. Take care. Bye.